Well, good morning. We wanted to talk a little bit about how to make counseling effective in your marriage today. If you're going to spend the time, energy, and money going to marriage counseling, it's important that you're going to make it effective. And we talk about going to marriage counseling a lot here at Awesome Marriage because we really believe in it. How are you doing this morning, Dr. Kim?
I'm doing good. I'm good weekend coming up. We're supposed to have great weather. Looking forward to getting outside and just enjoying God's creation this weekend a lot. And I'm excited about this topic. Obviously, I'm a firm believer in Christian counseling. I know what counseling did for us early in our marriage, and just it's something that can really make a difference. And hopefully, couples will take advantage of the opportunities that are there to make their marriage more of what God intended it to be. But how do you make it
Yeah, definitely.
effective?
Exactly, that's the thing, and I think a lot of us don't know how to make it effective because it's not like we're, like, pro counselor goers, right? That's not a thing, and so, I think it's helpful to talk about this topic, to give people kind of a peek into it, especially if they're new to counseling. There are a lot of things that would have been helpful for me to know before Dylan and I went to marriage counseling for the first time, and so
Sure.
to be able to share what we've learned, I think is really cool. So Dr. Kim, what are some ways that you see couples not take full advantage of counseling?
Yeah, I think we live in such a culture of everything's wanting a quick fix. And I think sometimes we come to counseling, want that. Well, we'll go to counseling once or twice and we're going to be fine. Everything's okay. But it's not a quick fix usually. Rarely we can do something in a couple sessions, but most of the time it's going to take time because you've been in some of the patterns for a long time. And then I think a lot of times couples just don't dedicate the time. They go to counseling once a week or every 2 weeks, but they don't do anything in between. They don't do the homework the counselor has asked them to do. They don't take the time for each other. They're not intentional every day with their marriage. And so they go to counseling 3 months, saying, "Oh, our marriage isn't really that much better or better at all." And well, you haven't been doing the things that you were asking to do. And the other thing is when you do set aside that time, I think a lot of times we look at it as a checking off a box as opposed to really growing our marriage. And so we don't eliminate distractions. But
Mm.
when you're really focusing on your marriage, when you're working on communication, connecting, all those kind of things, even having fun together, you got to get rid of the distractions, which means mobile devices and TVs and kids and dogs and cats and anything that would keep you from focusing on each other. The only thing that you should be focusing on besides each other is God. And so you want to make the atmosphere that you're doing these things in as conducive to being effective as possible. And so if you're distracted, you're just not going to it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think not going regularly enough is a big one. I think a lot of times people treat counseling like a doctor's appointment, like, oh, we did that once a year. Like we went,
Yeah.
they told us what to do. Now we're good. And I kind of think that's not the best way to view counseling. I think it's more like something else you would do for your health, like maybe like working out or something that you need to do on a regular basis and a kind of like a program to like learn new habits and learn how to break cycles and things like, especially if your marriage is having trouble. I think, if you've ever thought, I don't want to be in this marriage, if you've ever thought about divorce, then I'd say your marriage needs work. And so you're going to need regular appointments. So every week or every other week for a period of time to make sure you're checking in and really doing that work that it needs in order for the counseling to be effective.
Yeah, and I think there's a built-in accountability when you go to counseling. You have the session, you talk about things with your counselor about that you're going to do between the next session. Well, if you didn't come back the next time, maybe the motivation wouldn't be there. I think part of it is there is some accountability in there for people to come in and tell me, "Hey, we tried this, it really worked," or "We tried that, that really didn't work." And it gives me some information. And okay, they do better with this kind of homework than they did with that kind of homework. So with accountability and giving that feedback to your counselor is really important.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that along with the accountability, like if your marriage is in trouble, it's one of those things that like don't just set counseling as a need base on a need base, like, oh well, we'll make an appointment when we need it. It's like if your marriage is in trouble, like it's not going to get fixed in a day, right? It's probably taken years and months to build some of these bad habits that you guys have. And so go ahead and set some reoccurring appointments instead
Sure.
of just like, oh, we went once in a couple months, we'll go again. Like go ahead and get on your counselor's schedule until you actually resolve some of this stuff.
Well, and I think that's important because what I do see people sometimes not do, and if your counselor is a good counselor, there's probably schedule's going to be pretty full. So making sure you have those appointments because they'll come in once or twice and they won't rebook, and then they just have not been consistent enough, intentional enough, and then 6 weeks or 2 months later, they call wanting back in, and we do the best we can to get somebody back in. But if you're already on the schedule, then you're locked in, and I think it just works that much better.
Yeah, I agree. I think the other thing is that makes couples not kind of take full advantage of not is not knowing what to say in the counseling appointment, like not
Yeah,
knowing like what to tackle. I think a lot of us are easily forgetful. So we might have a big fight or a few issues and it doesn't get resolved, but then a few days pass and a few
yeah,
weeks pass, and then we go to our counseling appointment and we're just kind of like staring blank at the counselor and you don't know what to bring up. And so my encouragement to you in that scenario would be to write stuff down. Have a marriage counseling journal where you're kind of jotting things down of what you want to bring up, things, issues that aren't getting resolved, feelings that you're feeling in different scenarios with your spouse. And it's not about tattling on each other, because I think a lot of us
right.
think like, well, if I have a list of what my spouse is doing wrong, like they're going to think I'm just tattling on them. And it's not about that. It's about bringing your real issues to counseling so that you can make it productive. If you want for counseling to be, good, you're going to have to be vigilant about sharing with the counselor, sharing your conflict, sharing what's going on in the home with them so that they can know how to speak into that, and sharing how your spouse is making you feel and how you feel about certain situations. Your counselor cannot help you if you don't share with them.
No, and you've got to be completely honest. And I think one
Mhm.
of the things I talk to couples about is that, if you're going to be honest in here, it may be something that does hurt a little bit, but it stays in here. And this is what we're working on. So when you walk out of here, you don't beat the other person up because they said that or whatever, because then they may not be honest the next time. And yeah, it may be a little painful the first few times as we get everything on the table, but you got to get those out there so we can work on them. And so I think that's part of the process for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, how can we make counseling effective? What do we do, Dr. Kim?
Well, I think you do want to trust your counselor. I think if you're going to be and so I think when you're looking for a counselor, finding someone that has a good reputation, maybe you have someone that's gone to them, so that trust can be built there. Because it's hard to be honest with someone that you don't trust. And then I think you want to make sure that it's okay to ask questions. If your counselor says something or asks you to do something and you don't understand it or don't understand why, ask the question. If it upsets your counselor, then you may need a different counselor, because I like people ask questions. I want to make sure they understand what I say. And they may have a perspective that I haven't thought of. And I think, okay, instead of this, let's do this for your homework, because that sounds like that will work better for you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And then once you get that, do what your counselor asks you to do. I mean,
Mhm.
if you go and you don't do that, one, it tells your counselor that you're really not all in on this. You come in saying we want to save our marriage, but you don't do anything that they ask you to in between. Do what they ask you to do, and then give them good feedback. Hey, this was good. This worked well. I love it when a couple comes in and they're just beaming. They're saying, we did what you asked us to do, and look what happened. And this thing came up that in the past, if it had come up, we would have just been fighting for days about it. And we didn't. We sat down and talked it through and we resolved it. And so I love those stories, but you got to do the homework to get to those stories.
Yeah, that's right. You gotta listen to what the counselor says. That's what you're paying
Yeah.
them for. So, and they
Yes.
and they have a little bit of experience under the belt. They kind of know what they're doing. Yeah, I think other ways to make counseling effective is to make sure you give counseling the time that it deserves and that it needs.
Yeah.
Again, you've spent years and months kind of building into these unintentionally, but building into these marriage issues. So you're not going to solve them in a day. I cannot tell you how many couples I have talked to who are getting divorced or have gotten divorced, and they say, "I tried counseling." And I asked them a few more questions, and maybe they went to 10 appointments in total, like counseling appointments. And that's kind of like saying you tried working out when you went to the gym 10 times. If you're actually trying to get healthy and improve your heart health and, get strong, 10 workouts, that's not going to cut it. If you're really trying to solve the issues in your marriage, 10 counseling sessions might just be the beginning. You need to give it time, time to implement the homework, time to change the habits, to break cycles, to work through things that are not just on the surface. Because you go into counseling, if you're anything like Dylan and I, we went into counseling thinking we were going to talk about X, Y, and Z. Well, after lots of questions and digging deeper and prayer and work with the counselor showing us things that we didn't see, we had a lot of issues underneath those things that we needed to
Right.
work through, that we wouldn't have found on our own. And so you need to give counseling time.
That's a really good point because say someone comes in and in their conflict they scream at each other. So we talk about what to do, timeouts and things like that. And so all of a sudden they're not screaming at each other when they have conflict. So we put a band-aid in it and they quit coming to counseling. But we didn't discover why they're having those kind of fights. Why does that emotion get so high? Why does that escalate? What buttons are being touched there? What needs to be dealt with so that you don't pick up something else that's unhealthy for your marriage, that you really resolve that in yourself and in your marriage. And so it's a great point that you made because I think sometimes it takes those things to do that. And I love it when a couple is willing to, they kind of reach a plateau and they're willing to say, okay, what's the next level? What else needs to be done here? And ask your counselor that question.
Yeah.
And sometimes I've told couples, I'd said, you guys are in a good place. I think there's some other things that you're going to deal with. And I may even identify a couple of them for them. And I say, but I think you need some consistency with what you're doing now. So let's do that. And maybe I'll say, let's book an appointment for 2 months. And if you need to come in before then, do that. But I think you'll be ready then if you keep doing what you're doing to take that next step because you're spending so much time and energy getting yourself where you are now. I don't think you're quite ready to kind of dig a little bit. So talk to your counselor about that.
Yeah, that's good advice. I love that. And the other thing that was super helpful for me when I went to marriage counseling with Dylan, is to take notes in the counseling session. The first few appointments, I didn't bring anything to take notes with. And it's amazing how much you forget what the counselor said
You
when you
do.
walk out of that room. And so to be able to take notes of like, oh, that was really good what he just said there, or oh, this is the homework that I need to work on, to be able to write that down and be able to look at it
Yes.
later is really helpful. So, and you can just take notes on your phone if that works for you, or bring a journal and just jot
Yeah.
out a few notes. I think is really
Yeah.
helpful.
And if you get in there and forget something, ask your counselor for a pad of paper
Yeah,
and a pen.
absolutely.
You know,
I'm sure
we
they
we
have it.
we got them. We got them everywhere. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's good. I love it. Well, what final word do you have for listeners today about making counseling effective in your marriage?
Yeah, I think sometimes you think we need to go to counseling. Sometimes we put it off. I would encourage people to take that step. I don't think you'll ever regret going to counseling. And I think making it a priority and then once you get in there, commit to work together to make your marriage better, to do what the counselor says, to do your homework, and then just celebrate every step that you make because it's a
Yeah.
lot of fun to see your marriage turn and eventually a 180 where you're going in a totally different direction than you were before.
Yeah, that is super encouraging. Well, thanks for tuning in today. We hope you guys will take the next step towards counseling if that is the next step for you. And we hope you guys have an awesome weekend.
Yeah, have a great weekend.